2 weeks ago at Watkins Glen, the season took a turn that is almost going to be impossible for Hugo Louis to overcome. Two things emerged. The first one, Gregor Hutu is still that guy to beat. The second, Hugo Louis now needs to hope that for the rest of the season, there's no more mistakes, no more tangling with teammates, no more issues, because now he's on the back foot like never before. The last round saw Hugo Louis and Martin Kroenke out on the first corner of the first lap, and whilst Hutu stormed on to victory, Louis was left on the sidelines waiting, hoping for an opportunity to come his way a little bit on in the season. Today we're at Virginia International Raceway, a track known to many simply as the Green Hell, and perhaps a chance for Louis to try and gain some of that momentum back. We're now approaching the halfway point of the season, and from here on in, it's going to be tough. We've got Silverstone, Spa, Indianapolis, Motegi all coming up in the next 2 months, and there's still so much for these drivers to fight for. For Louis, he's got to start winning. He's got to start winning races fast. For Gregor Hutu, he knows consistent top finishes will pretty much nail him his third title. The question coming into this week is simple. Can Team My3ID get back on the same page? Can Hugo Louis get to the top step of the podium once again? And can Martin Kroenke and the rest of the drivers in that team work together to try and take points away from Gregor Hutu and the Team Redline machine? It's going to be important. The next 2 hours here live on GlacierTV will, like never before, really cement who is going to be the dominant force in the second half of the season, and it's going to show if Louis and My3ID have anything left in the tank to overcome a string of bad finishes in the last couple of races. Hello again everyone, Will Vincent alongside Ben Rothberg and Marius Golombeck for the 8th round of the iRacing.com World Championship Grand Prix Series. As always, there is so much to talk about in this, the GlacierTV pre-race show, but the most important thing is this. Gregor Hutu now has a 104-point gap over Hugo Louis, and actually, Kirchhoff in the third position in the standings is now only 7 points behind the Brazilian who leads Team My3ID's charge. So much, as I say, to talk about, but as always, before we go any further, let's introduce this track. Let's introduce the Green Hell, Virginia International Raceway. Opened in 1957 and located in the community of Alton near Danville in Virginia, Virginia International Raceway, or VIR, is colloquially known simply as the Green Hell. It is a track that challenges drivers like no other and is known not just in the United States but worldwide as one of the most difficult stops in all of GT racing. Now, the track closed in 1974 before reopening in March of 2000, and it's a place where you can buy a membership and actually go and race on the racetrack itself. The track also hosts a number of racing series throughout the year, most importantly the American Le Mans series, which challenges the drivers probably more than any other single track outside of Le Mans itself. Now, as we start to have a look at the racetrack, we'll come past the start-finish line. You'll notice immediately just how narrow the track is. It's about 3 cars wide past the start-finish line, but then it funnels down on pit exit to barely being 2 grooves wide as you come down into turn number 1 and 2, the horseshoe. Get a nice late entry into here, but then hold that inside curve. Set the car out to the outside so you can get yourself a good piece of momentum going into the second part of the corner, giving yourself a bit of momentum as you come down this short straightaway before the double apex left hand for turn 3, known as NASCAR Bend. Now, this isn't that difficult a corner, but again, want to make sure you use that curb and exit, get yourself a good momentum before you slow the car down into turn number 4, the left hook. Immediately following this, a right-hander as you now begin to enter into the snake, turns 5, 5A, 6 and 6A. You're approaching a very difficult part of the racetrack here. Really important to have a good consistent line, and as the tyres fall away over the course of the run, that complex will be really difficult for these drivers. A short straightaway, but again, you notice actually the straightaways aren't really straightaways. You're always kind of moving that car around as you traverse the racetrack. And now you're coming in to turn 7 through 9, the climbing S's. You can use a little bit of curb here, but because line is so important, especially as the fuel burns off, you don't want to use too much of it. Otherwise, simply, you're going to end up putting yourself into a world of trouble. Turn 10, South Bend. Now you're coming to the part of the track that everyone knows, the famous turn number 11 and 12. The Oak Tree corner. It's a double apex, 90-degree right-hander. A little bit like that at Road Atlanta. Come out of it, you need to have good momentum. Now, as you're coming down Madison Avenue, the back straightaway, you can see in the distance the approach to the roller coaster turns 14, 14A. You can also see just how much elevation change there is at this part of the racetrack. You won't actually be able to see the apex of turn 14 until you're right there. It's going to be a left-hand kink before a right-hander when you come into that corner. And now you see the markers on the right-hand side. You've got to hold your breath, turn into turn number 14, and then flick that car to the right for turn 14A. Turn 15 will immediately follow that, a left-hander, and then you'll come again pretty quickly into turn number 16. Just a very short straightaway before you make that turn to the left and then to the right for Hog Pen Complex turn 16, and then turn 17, and then turn 17A to complete the lap. This really is a tough challenge for these drivers, and if you can imagine that lap times are going to be so fast, and the guys up top are looking for hundredths of a second, not tenths of a second, not seconds, really will show the determination of a driver will be a critical factor in ensuring they do well at this racetrack. That's been for Joni International Raceway. Hold your breath, enjoy it. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the GlacierTV pre-race show for the 8th round of the iRacing.com World Championship Grand Prix Series. Now, Marius, I'm going to come to you immediately. In qualifying, Hugo Louise getting pole position by just 1/1000th of a second over Gregor Hooter even. But then also, you have Fulvio Barazini in that 3rd position. A great qualifying by him.
Yeah, it's incredibly close, and good surprise by the Italian there. One of 3 drivers here putting in a 1 minute 22 lap time. In 4th position then, the Dutchman Atzi Kirchhoff from Redline Racing. 2 places behind his teammate Gregor Hootu and Marti Piatella completing the top 5. And if you look down the grid from then on, it's not even 5/10 of a second, all the way down to position 24, 25. So if you're in that pack, you're going to get about 5 to 6 positions up or down with every 10th you gain.
And that's important because this is a track that we've talked about in the track guide. It is difficult to overtake here. The track isn't the widest that we go to all season. So these drivers are going to have to think about things like strategy. They're going to have to think about, how can they get themselves through cars. The start is going to be important here. We think that there's going to be probably a pretty sizable crash in the first lap. But also, Marius, these guys have got to be patient here today because it's a track that really can abuse the tyres and there's not much room for error.
And it can not only abuse the tires, but also your concentration, of course, as we are going over 58 laps. And this track has as much turns as 2 races or even 3 races on other tracks. So you're gonna get concentration issues if you're not exactly paying attention towards what you're doing. So in the end of the race, even if you're leading, even if you've got well of a space right behind you, well of a space right ahead, you're still gonna run into little mistakes, and a little mistake on this track can easily cost you the race.
Standings up on your screen at the moment, and this shows the point standings for the drivers at the moment. Don't forget, of course, the drivers will get to throw away their worst race of the season. You notice in the top 10 actually there's only one driver with a really bad race that he's thrown away. That is Hugo Louise, the driver that we've talked about pretty much the last 2 weeks, and the fact that he, for the middle part of the season, really has to get going now if he's going to close that gap to Gregor Huttu. We've talked about it already. 104 points is the gap now between the Brazilian and the Finnish driver of Gregor Huttu, and Atsi Kirkov is knocking on the door of that second place as well. You see the top 10 up on your screen. Importantly, however, Marius, we got news a couple of days ago. Martin Kroenke will be sitting out the rest of the season, bar perhaps the last couple of rounds. Now, we want to say straight out, this is in no way due to what happened at Watkins Glen 2 weeks ago. But for Martin, you know, on one hand, you know, he wants to get himself to ensure that he's got a charge for 2014. For Hugo, he's kind of lost his rear gunner now.
Yeah, he really does, and it's going to be harder and harder for him to compete in this series alone. He's still got a couple of quick teammates, Andre Böttcher or also Jörn Jens, who's still a pro driver and will not make it to the race today, as there are no pro drivers eligible to participate. However, Martin has been backing up Hugo at least, and he's been getting stronger and stronger lately, so he could even snatch a win later in the season, so it's a little bit disappointing to miss him here, but we hope he can at least get back for 1 or 2 races later in the season and secure his license for the next season.
And that's important actually for Kroenke, because at the start of the season, you know, it wasn't his best start to the season, but then he really did improve. He's led laps here in the series. He's had a chance to win races. Unfortunately, now he will be missing, as I say, the majority of the rest of the season, as we have 7 rounds of the championship complete, working on round number 8 today. But let's go back to Barazini, because that I think is important. He really has been one of the standout drivers, probably alongside Max DeLorco the last couple of rounds in their performance, and Barazini just has improved race on race on race.
Absolutely, and with the 3rd position today in the qualifying, he's really shown that he's becoming one of the top runners here. And maybe even he's one of the guys looking towards the Kroenke missing in these races. He's definitely going to share at his top 3 winnings here. And he's even beaten Atsi Kirkov to the qualifying already, and a couple of drivers like Max Del Orco, Daniel Otis, or even Stephen Michaels, who have been on the top, at least in the top 5 for a couple of races now. So it's really going to be interesting now. We've had 4 or 5 drivers in the season who've been sharing the top 5 positions now, and with Kroenke dropped here, we've definitely got about 5 more eligible towards the top 3 position today.
But then you have a look down to 25th position, and 25th is important for those of you who are new to iRacing. The top 25 drivers will retain their World Championship Series license for 2014. The other drivers will have to race in the iRacing.com Pro Series of Road Racing to regain their World Championship Series license for next season. And right now you have Daniel Lopez and Timo Ivinen. They are 22nd, 23rd in the championship right now with 61 points. You've got Paul Lubin, Jason Lover, 24th and 25th, 5 points behind them. But Marius, you go down, Petru Cotavaro, Miguel Martin, Marcus Caton, Matthias Egger. They are all very close in that battle for P25. And you also have people like PJ Sturgis, who had a disastrous qualifying here today. That battle will continue all season long. And for these guys, it's all about consistency. They need to finish races, more importantly than anything else.
Absolutely, and we may not forget that a couple of drivers from the Pro Series 2012, of course, which has been held last year in the winter, have got a good shot at getting the DWC license early this year. Jörn Jens currently the best positioned pro driver in the standings, 37th position for him, only 1 race done, but with the 5th position last race, he's got a good 28 points in, and that's a big step towards a position in the top 25. However, the pro drivers rely on the pro/WC drivers, which have got the world-class license, and fill the grid in. So if there's a couple of drivers missing from the World Championship Series, pro drivers slowly get spots in the grid, and that will occur often in the end of the season. So we're likely to see Jörn Jens as well as other drivers from the Pro Series later this season.
So right now we've got ourselves about 3 minutes left of the practice session before the guys head themselves onto the grid. Coverage now up on your screens. And the battle today really is going to be between Louise and Huttu once again. The question is, however, we've seen already in this season that Huttu will take the alternative strategy. He did it so well at Sebring. Starting from that 2nd position, do you think that he will try that alternative strategy, maybe do 2 stops and hope he'll feed himself one into traffic? Or would it be Hugo who'll have to be the one who's ultra aggressive, do you think? Or will they just do 1 stop each?
I really wonder what it's doing. However, we've got the grid on site at the moment, and we'll definitely talk about the strategies later on. You see the My3AD driver ahead of the red line driver. It's been going like this for the entire season. Lewis ahead of Hutu. Second row, Berrezzini with a good third position ahead of Team Redline driver Atzi Kirchhoff. Marty Piatella in fifth, and Max Del Orco, who's had his up and down season, however, with a great show at Watkins Glen, now in sixth position, and that's maybe what he needs to get a good shot today. Daniel Lopez in seventh, followed by Stephen Michaels, and now the time's really getting close. Michaels 0.003 of a second ahead of Jake Sturgis, and even Sturgis is not even 300th ahead of Jeremy Bouteloup, who completes the top 10.
And don't forget, of course, we're racing here today at Virginia International Raceway. This track measures 3.27 miles in length. There are 20 corners on this racetrack. Track temperature 78 degrees Fahrenheit, a northerly wind of 2 miles an hour. But for Hugo Luis, 1/1000th of a second in that battle for pole position on a track that measures over 3 miles in length, I don't think a number of these viewers will realise just how close that is, Marius.
Absolutely, and even we've had a couple of races, the mid-pack is always quite close. So if you're in 15th position, 14th position, you're always going to have thousandths of a second gap to the front and the rear. But today we've also got that gap at the very front. Hugo Luis leading the grid with 1,000th ahead of Gregor Hutu, and even Fulvio Berrezzini another time of 1 minute 22.8, and then we've got 1.5 tenth gap, in fact, to fourth position Atzi Kirchhoff, and from him on, the entire grid almost is within 1.2 seconds, and that's all the way down to outside of the top 30. And it just shows it's getting closer and closer, and on a track like VIR, which has got 20 turns here, 5.26 kilometers long, and is not really technically suited for the F1 car, that just shows how high the pressure is. So even if you're down in 30th position, you have to concentrate, you have to get a good qualifying in, and if you miss a slight turn, if you miss a braking point, you're maybe not even going to make it to the race.
I'll tell you what as well, a number of drivers are struggling right now at Oak Tree Corner in the centre of the lap. We'll talk about this more as the race progresses. But only 3 drivers setting a time of 1:22s here today. Atzi Kirchhoff, now this is the interesting thing for me. I'm wondering whether the fact that Hutu did a standout qualifying lap because of the fact that Atzi, is 2 tenths of a second further back. Because we haven't really got any comparison for My3AD right now. It's just Hugo setting his own time. Normally we have very good comparison with the top My3AD driver, and then, Martin Kroenke, who's the second place guy in that team, and then you have Hutu and Kirchhoff. We haven't got that comparison here, so in some ways it's making this middle part of the season very interesting, Marius.
Absolutely, and there's also going to be a couple of interesting races later on, of course also involving the classical racetracks, Silverstone, Zandvoort, and a couple of drivers who have been doing these in other cars and who have emerged from GT Series, for example, towards this series, and they are very, very strong here. For example, Del Orco or Stephen Michaels, also drivers very fast in other cars, but have found their home today in the Drivers' World Championship Series and the Formula 1 car.
Indeed, and the checkered flag is now in hand, so the guys are heading themselves to the grid for this, the 8th round of the iRacing.com World Championship Grand Prix Series. Will Vincent, Marius Golombeck, don't forget, keep in contact with us on Twitter, use the hashtag iRacingWCS. Also, after this race, we'll be having an in-depth chat with the guys over at INX Racing as well, so submit your questions on Twitter in that way. To run through your top 10 drivers one more time, Hugo Luis setting a time of 1:22.850, just 1/1000th of a second ahead of Gregor Hutu. Fulvio Berrezzini will start in 3rd, Atzi Kirchhoff in 4th, Marty Piatella in 5th, and Max Del Orco in 6th. Great qualifying by both of them drivers. Daniel Lopez and Stephen Michaels. Michaels having a great run right now in this middle part of the season. He'll start in 8th, Jake Sturgis in 9th, Jeremy Bouteloup will round out your top 10. A total of 35 cars starting this race here today. The last one of them is PJ Sturgis in the number 34 car. But if you have a look at the standings between, Sturgis did a 1:24.9, so the entire field is separated by just over 2 seconds on the racetrack. On a track where passing is going to be very difficult. On a track where you're going to have to be patient. You really are going to have to hope and pray that everything goes well for you. We are waiting now on iRacing Race Control to get those red lights in motion. Any moment now, we'll be going racing for 58 laps here at Virginia International Raceway. Who's going to get the start? It's going to be a good start, actually, as the lights go out by Gregor Hutu. He's immediately going to try and look to the outside. Will he try and do the cut under down into turn number 1? He won't. We have a crash down at the start finish line. Luis leads away. Hutu second. You've got Patella down to the inside. And contact there with Atsi Kirchhoff. He'll complete the pass. Well, Lopez will go past as well. It looks like Kirchhoff has damage early on, Marius.
Yeah, and the track is just so narrow down to turn 1 as Jake Sturgis as well with trouble in turn number 2 and 3 right now. But if you try to overtake here and slip just a little bit outside of the turn, you get wheel spin, you're almost in every time hit the car which is running on the outside. But as for the moment, it doesn't look like Atsi Kirchhoff has got much damage, neither does Marty Pitella.
So right now the guys are working themselves down towards Oak Tree Corner for the first time. We've got a car off track as well. This is down in the middle portion of the racetrack. We're trying to get confirmation of who that is momentarily. You have Ika Hapana and Mook McLean. They both look as though they are going to be out of the race here. And this was down in the climbing S's. Luke McLean was looking down to the inside of Hika Hapana as they came down into the corner. McLean, they too got sideways there. Hapana actually got sideways and just turned into Luke McLean, putting both of them drivers out of the race. Meanwhile, Hugo Luis, as he works himself down into the roller coaster for the first time, he's got himself right now about a 5 tenths of a second gap to Gregor Hutu, who still sits in the second position. But these top 2 drivers right now have pulled away an incredible gap, Marius, over Barazini in 3rd. And then, of course, in the 4th position right now, you have Daniel Lopez. He's got a car on pit road. That is Martin Patella. And, of course, he was involved in that incident at the first corner.
So Pietili does in fact have damage as Atsi Kirchhoff is trying to get the 4th position back here. Now from Daniel Lopez, of course, who could get the position out of turn 1, and he might even get it, and Atsi Kirchhoff gets the position. Very risky move here out of the turn, but he makes it stick as Daniel Lopez has to stick back and give Atsi Kirchhoff back the 4th position. But we may not forget, ahead of them, also with a big gap now on 3rd position, Fulvio Barazini, who himself got over 2 seconds of a gap to the top 2. So that just shows bad start by Barazini and the guys below, and a little bit of trouble in turn 1, and you've immediately got 2 or 3 seconds gap to the front.
And at the start, they were trying to go 3 wide there. One of the cars, I think that was Max DeLorco, getting a very slow start actually. That made the cars 3 wide, and then DeLorco's spot, which is called the train reaction, would stick out Jeremy Boosley and Stephen Michaels as well before the cars even got down into turn number 1. Michaels is still circulating on the racetrack, however, right now is scored down in the 23rd position on the racetrack. Let's turn our attention to battle for the race lead, however, because that gap at the end of lap 1 was 2 seconds between Hutu in 2nd and Barazini in 3rd. Luis right now is pulling away just a little bit.
Yeah, he is a little bit, but you say it. I mean, it's not really that much, and it shouldn't be too hard for Gregor Hutu to at least follow Hugo Lewis. And then it's going to be a question of the pit strategy. It has been a critical point in the past races, and it's going to be a critical point today. Will we see 2 stops? Will we see 1 stops only? And will we see an incredibly experienced strategy move by a couple of drivers here, putting it on a very risky strategy and trying to make it stick?
Meanwhile, Yudo Ramumi on the move right now as he goes past Mogar Fido. These two battled in the iRacing.com Pro Series of Road Racing. The battle right now for the 7th and 8th positions on the racetrack, and Fido actually under a little bit of pressure from Andre Borcher as well in the My 3ID machine. Borcher currently sat in the 9th position on the racetrack, couldn't get the job done as they worked themselves through the climbing S's once again on the racetrack. But also you've got yourself Jake Sturgis right on the rear of Daniel Lopez in the battle for the 5th position. Jake Sturgis looking very racy early on in this race, Marius.
Yeah, and it's definitely a good situation for Atsi Kirchhoff there. He got away from the guys. He overtook Daniel Lopez 2 laps ago, and now with Lopez fighting against Sturgis, Kirchhoff has immediately broken free, and he's looking as he would be the 3rd fastest guy here, together with the 2 race leaders here. And Fulvio Barazini a little bit slower as Jack Sturgis makes the move on Daniel Lopez. A good top speed here by the American driver from Inex Racing, and he makes the move and makes it stick, and therefore gains the 5th position.
Indeed, yeah, and we'll be talking to Jake Sturgis and the rest of the Inex Racing team after this race concludes on GlacierTV Ice Lounge. But Sturgis right now up into the 5th position on the racetrack. It was a nice move there down into the roller coaster, and it looks as though that Lopez just gave him the position. Meanwhile, we have ourselves a lot of action on the racetrack and a lot of passing actually. Enzo Benito trying to go side by side. Yonis Mano Tomano actually looking down to the inside there of the Orion Racing car. He will complete the pass on Davy the Corpse. The Corpse will lose 2 positions there, and that's down into turn number 1, Marius. And this is a part of the track that we've seen drivers getting very sideways all the way through the race. In fact, Hugo Luis on his pole qualifying lap was drifting through that corner as ahead of him. You've had 2-eyed racing for about 3 corners now, and that was between Mogar Fido and Andre Borcher. Borcher's been able to get past Fido.
Yeah, Butcher makes up the position, and he said it. It's going to be a very tricky turn as Joni Terminal is right at the rear of Morgafilo as well. And if you miss the braking point, like we've just seen with Davide Corps, you're almost certainly going to slide off and just hit a little bit of grass, not necessarily making you spin or getting you into further trouble, but you definitely get a bad exit, and that's all the other driver needs to get past, and that's what we've seen with Joni Terminal and Davide Corps. Yes, Terminal's got a good slipstream on Morgafilo and could maybe do the same thing we've seen last lap together with Jake Sturgis and Daniel Lopez, and it looks like, yes, he's got a good gearing, a good long 7th gear, very little downforce, and he makes the move and gets the top 10 position here and is now right behind Andrea Böttcher's teammate from My 380 game.
Meanwhile, we're going to check in on Timo Uvenin right now. He's battling his Davi. It looks as though that someone's off the racetrack. That is Dion Burgess in the Orion Racing Team number 22 car. He's fallen down now into the 21st position on the racetrack, going off at the roller coaster. And that's one of the things we haven't yet talked about. That long back straightaway that is known as Madison Avenue. Now, for these drivers, if you can set up a 2nd gear, it works well for you. However, if you're running in clean air, it's a little bit slower, Marius. So these guys are hoping that they're going to be running in a pack all the way through the race, especially those guys right now who are passing people. Later on, they might struggle a little bit more.
Yeah, you have to find a compromise. Can't make it too long, of course, not making it too short. You want to get an overtake here, and really the only overtaking opportunity is the long straight here. Flat out for almost 20 seconds there, so if you can't make a pass there, where will you make a pass here, really? You can't outbrake people, you can't just overtake them out of the turns, because you're not getting a good run out of any turn here. If you're going to make a pass, if you're going to try to make a pass, make it on the long straight, but you definitely need the gearing for it. As we see Atzi Kirchhoff and Fulvio Berrezzini, that's the battle for the 3rd position, together with the Team Redline driver here in 4th, who's had a difficult start here, a little bit of contact with a driver from Team 4 racer Ajira, Max Del Orco, and he's just struggled for a couple of laps now, but he's apparently found his pace as he's doing almost exactly the lap times as the leaders, and Fulvio Berrezzini is a little bit slower. So guys, would you even suspect that Berrezzini is on a 1-stop here?
Well, we were just discussing that, myself and Joni, actually. We think that Hutu and Luis right now are on a 2-stop strategy. They are already 7 seconds ahead of that 3rd place driver, Fulvio Berrezzini, lapping 1 second plus faster per lap. Now, we know that Luis is good, we know that Hutu is good, however, they're not normally able to gap the field that much. We think right now those top 2 drivers at least on a 2-stop strategy, Berrezzini on that alternative 1-stop strategy. One driver I need to update you about, Morgafilo. He crashed that car on a lap number 5 down at Oak Tree Corner. Simple, he got himself onto that white line, spun the car on the curb into the tyre barrier. That was game over for Fido. He's brought that car on pit road, trying to get himself some repairs. Not looking as though it's going to be too good a day for Morgafilo. However, right now, let's check in on that battle for the race lead, Marius. Because Gregor Hutu is still within about 7/10 of a second over Hugo Luis. And he really is trying to push it right now. As behind him, Atzi Kirchhoff is now going to try and get past Fulvio Berrezzini. This is going to be the easiest pass of the day. Kirchhoff down to the inside. He will complete that pass as they come down into the roller coaster. Yes, he will. So Kirchhoff will move himself up into the 3rd position, move Fulvio Berrezzini down into 4th. When we talk about your race leaders, already 7+ seconds ahead. They'll come past the start-finish line in a couple of moments. We'll get an update on the times. But Hutu and Luis, they are very close to separating the racetrack. We saw this in qualifying. I'm wondering whether one of these drivers might just have a couple of little less gallons on the tank to try and outsmart the other.
Yeah, and that's a good question there, really, and because they're really looking towards a very similar strategy, at least close by 2 or 3 laps at least, because the times just show to be exactly the same, almost identical every lap here, as well as Atzi Kirchhoff, of course, the teammate of Gregor Hutu in 3rd, has been posting similar lap times here, and we've also got a couple of good lap times in by drivers like Jake Sturgis, Andrea Böttcher, and Joni Terminal down the field, all 1 minute 24s for the remainder of the race. So they are probably looking for a 2-stop strategy here, but then the question really remains, what is Fulvio Berrezzini on? It can only be a long first stop, a long first stint, and a 1-stop strategy, of course. Kirchhoff just got past and is immediately breaking free from the Italian driver here, and that might be interesting because he's just 9 seconds down from the lead, and if he's really on a 1-stop strategy, he needs to pick up some pace here.
Meanwhile, Blake Townend trying to go to the outside. They touch there down into Oak Tree Corner. Blake Townend into the wall. His race pretty much will be done. This was down into the Oak Tree Corner. As I said, they're working on lap number 7. Daniel Lopez is out of the race as well. And this all started as Blake Townend. We've also got another crash on the racetrack as well. Again with Blake Townend. And this looks like Dion Burgess and you have PJ Sturgis involved as well. We have almost a track blockage here, as, yeah, the track was entirely blocked at Oak Tree Corner for about 5 seconds there, and that is going to be hugely annoying for Sturgis and for Verges. They had absolutely nowhere to go.
Yeah, and you really have nowhere to get, kind of like the Oak Tree there. The track was just absolutely blocked, and Townend trying to recover from the grass, just putting a little bit of wheel spin on the rear tires and just getting it sideways, clipping another car on the way through, and then just blocking the track with nowhere to go. And that's an absolute devastating race there if you're stuck in there. We've also seen PJ Sturgis, who's worked his way up into 24th position, but he's going to lose a lot of time right now as he's in the pits as well.
So, we're going to get a replay up on your screens, having a look at what happened with Blake Townend. And this is actually as the cars work themselves through the climbing S's down towards South Bend. And Blake Townend, you see, he's actually trying to work on Daniel Lopez as they work themselves through South Bend. Townend got a much better run on the outsides. They came down to Oak Tree Corner. You see very often, actually, cars will just put themselves to the outside to avoid contact. And then Daniel Lopez hits the curb on the inside, and that appears him into Townend and puts him into the tyre barrier. And then what happens after that is that Townend actually trying to get that car back onto the racetrack. He spins that car once again, and he first actually hits Jesper Pedersen, and then the track then gets blocked behind him. Dion Verges was trying to get fast. He hit. Stephen Michaels was able to get through there, as there's carnage on the racetrack. And then also PJ Sturgis as well. He lost himself 4 or 5 positions in that battle. Marius, you have to say, that was pretty ugly.
That was, and you can't really do much there. I mean, you're flat on the brakes. You're just trying to de-accelerate the car as much as possible, and if you see there's a crash ahead, you can't really do much more than that, and just a little bit of a bump you've seen from PJ Sturgis there is enough to damage the front of the car, and he needed to pit and get a new nose there, as that's just going to cost him several seconds per lap. However, we've got a new 4th position driver here, Jack Sturgis, gaining a position from the Italian Fulvio Barazini. He's just been tossed down the grid a little bit. Atsi Kirchhoff, meanwhile, in 3rd. He's been passing him a few laps earlier, and he's already 2 seconds faster per lap, doing a little bit slower lap times than the leaders here. And I think it's safe to say that Fulvio Barazini's got a very heavy car here, doing a long first stint here, and the times he's doing right now, he's just losing a bit too much. I mean, we've got almost 50 laps to go here, and he's already 12 seconds down to the lead, and that might even be close for a top 3 finish here.
Yeah, and it's actually going to be very interesting to see what happens with Barazini over the course of this run. Don't forget, a lot of high-speed corners here as well. That will really put pressure on the tyres, especially in the latter half of the stint. But Kirchhoff now running in that 3rd position. He's only about 4 tenths per lap slower than Gregor Hooter and Hugo Luis ahead of him, as that gap in the battle for the race lead now up to 8 tenths per second on the racetrack. Now, Pablo Lopez was very close to the rear of Jason Lover, the first sector of this lap. It does look, in fact, that Lopez will be passed in the battle for the 13th position there by Christian Laurent. Laurent just breezes past Lopez there. And I have to say, it does look as though that Lopez, having got that 7th gear, sorted out well for him.
Yeah, he really does, and you see how difficult it can be if you don't have that sorted out, and it's just going to cost you time and time and time. And yeah, you can't really change it in the race, can you? So after a couple of laps, you will ask yourself, what have I done? Is this really the right way to set up the car, as the leaders are emerging towards the first overtakings here of drivers who have been in the pits already due to damage or due to an early strategy here. However, Hugo Lewis making the way past Dion Verges as well as Gregor Hootel, and that's an interesting thing to see right now, as they also approach Max Del Orco and Paul Ilbring. They're always going to lose a little bit of time there, and if they lose too much, then it might even be possible for Gregor Hootel here to make a pass if Hugo Lewis has nowhere to go and just needs to yeah, stay back, hold back, and just wait for a place to overtake. You easily gain a second there.
Indeed, yes, and very quickly what we're going to do is going to show you the gains and losses so far in this race. Of course, Hugo Luis, Gregor Hootel, they started and they are running in the top 2 positions. Antti Kirchhoff up 1 spot, Jake Sturgis up 5 positions, Judan Rumi up 6 spots, Porsche up 6 spots, and Joni Tamano as well up 9 positions early on in this race. Love it right now running in 11th, 14 positions. Your biggest movers of the day, however, Andres Lecombe and Christian Laurent currently running in the 60th and 12th positions respectively on the racetrack. And I have to turn our attention back as well. It was actually Matthias Egger who got past Pablo Lopez a lap ago on that run down into the roller coaster. But it looks like Hootel all of a sudden has started closing that gap as Luis is starting to work through traffic. We see this very often in GT racing. As soon as you're on a track like this, very difficult to pass. Luis will probably get past both of these back markers out of Oak Tree Corner. Hopefully, Hutu will also get past him as well and carry on racing.
Yeah, and we're taking a look at the battle, or not exactly the battle yet, but there might be a battle shaping up in the next couple of laps. The drivers of My3D Gaming, Andre Böttcher and Joni are currently in 7th and 8th, gaining on the Ronin Racing driver Yudai Narumi as well as Fulvio Barazini. And we know that Barazini is on a 1-stop, but Yudai Narumi is just 2/10 slower per lap as Böttcher is trying to get the slipstream here once again. He's made a pass like this already, but he's maybe a late now, maybe a bit too late now as he's trying to look down the inside, but no, he sticks back, and that's a risky move if you want to make it stick there. Absolutely no room for two cars as virtually everywhere on this track, so you have to be careful there and only try to make a pass if you're fully alongside. So it might take a while until Böttcher gets another try. I would just say, guys, at the same position, or maybe into turn 1 right now, but it's just not close yet. However, his teammate Joni not too far away as Böttcher trying to look down the inside again, and Yudai Narumi leaving him a good position of room, and that's fair racing of these two guys right now.
Indeed, yeah, and Narumi always won as one of the most calm and collected drivers in this series, especially in the first portion of the race. And we're going to get a start to replay very quickly of the race start. And Hutu actually got a very good start as the replay is coming up on your screen now. And he got a very good start from that second position. Wasn't able to get the job capitalised, however, as he worked down to turn number 1. The issue all started with Max Delorco. He got a little bit sideways at the start of this race. Very difficult for him to put the power down. And then what happened is he kind of went into the middle of the racetrack. And that is what collected Stephen Michaels and also Jeremy Bouteloup and Max Delorco were all on the grass as drivers were swarming to avoid them. And Marius, that really is just a case of driving and on a very narrow racetrack. You had a couple of incidents down in turn number 1 and 2 as well. But for the most part, everyone was able to get through okay.
Yeah, for the most part, but there's always going to be an incident created by two parties, and a couple of parties behind you can't really do anything. You can just follow and try to get clean into turn 1 or even out of turn 1, and on a narrow finish straight, which isn't really a straight here, it's more like a long turn here. You can't even see, and you've seen the Radicals car trying to avoid it there, Paul Ilbring, but no chance there, and he's just flat out getting it into the Adura car, and there's nothing you can do really. You can just rely on the people ahead to be safe and trying to work yourself around it. But on a so narrow racetrack here, you see two guys side by side, and there's no room for a third car even, so put it on the grass, race over, put it into another car, damage, race over, and there's just so many ways of ending a race before turn 1 already here.
And also you had Alexi Loma involved in an incident as well down turn 1. That was just up on your screen. I want to turn our attention back into this battle for the race lead, however. Hugo Luis, that gap is now closed to just 5 tenths from a second between himself and Gregor Hutu in that battle for the first position. You have to say, however, Marius, Hutu right now, he doesn't necessarily need the win. Luis is the driver who needs to win races. Right now, if the race is to finish, Luis would only gain 15 points over Gregor Hutu, and that is not enough right now. So Luis is the one that's got to win this race. For Hutu, it does look as though he's being very calm right now. The finish driver sat in that second position.
Yeah, and if I would be Gregor Hutu right now, that would be, yeah, I don't want to say the perfect situation right here in this race, but you can't really wish for much more. I mean, you could be first here and get another win, that would be just perfect, but he can right away get second and it won't really hurt him. Gregor Hutu needs to get second in all the races remaining, and even if Hugo Lewis wins all of these races, he's still not going to get the title, so trying to end this race, it's still a long way to go. We're in lap 14 of 58 here, and he just has to avoid making mistakes here, finish in second, only get 40 points. Alright, job done. You only lose a couple of points, but you're still going to be comfortable in the lead of the championship, and there's a long way to go.
Indeed, and you're just seeing there on board with Gregor Hutu. Meanwhile, battle for 15th, 16th and 17th positions on the racetrack. This is between right now Pablo Lopez, Andres Lacombe and Marcus Caton. And Lopez looks as though that he's trying to gap Lacombe, not doing it much successfully. But Marcus Caton is right there in that battle as well. It does look as though that Marcus Caton doesn't have that straight line speed advantage, however, of the two Radical drivers ahead of him. And Lopez, he's struggling right now, of course, in that 15th position. He had a pretty difficult start to this race. He started in 20th, and he's been able to work himself up 5 positions, running in 15th right now.
Andre Böttcher in the 7th position, currently one of the hottest places here on the track, and hot battles on the track, where we're seeing another battle around place 12 to 14 here. Butcher trying for a couple of laps right now, and Joni Termele meanwhile closing into his teammate. But Untitled making a good job there. And we have to say, guys, he's not really slower, so the guys are running at a very similar pace there, and only the drivers from position 1 to 4 are significantly faster. However, Fulvio Barazini has picked up a little bit of pace. He's 18 seconds down the leader, 7 seconds down in third position. But he's also into the 1 minute 24s right now, and the leaders just entered the 123s, and it looks like he's really gotten in the zone.
Indeed, and the leaders now are starting to really build that gap up. It's actually 11 seconds now between Hutu in the second position, Atsi Kirchhoff running in the third spot. Last time by Atsi Kirchhoff, a 124.640, a 1 minute 23.827. You saw the battle there also between 12th, 13th and 14th position on the racetrack, Laurent Egger and Stephen Michaels. You have to say, Michaels really has recovered. He started this race in 8th, was involved in that first lap incident, had to drive himself through the field. At one point, he was all the way down in the 22nd position on the racetrack and decided to build that gap back up now. And he's running in 14th, all over the rear of Matthias Egger in that battle for the 13th position
and
on the racetrack.
Mistake from Narumi. Mistake from Untitled, losing the position right on the beginning of the straight to Andrea Böttcher. Joni Termele still in slipstream of the Japanese driver, and Narumi not looking to get his position back there. He's just too far behind, leaving Andrea Böttcher to gain the 6th position here. And he got just a little bit slippery. I might even get a replay of that later on, but a little bit of slip on the exit of the oak tree, not getting a perfect exit. And Joni Termele is now right at the tail of Narumi and might try to make a move down into turn 1. He's already getting the room to the inside, and that's a big mistake from Narumi there, leaving the room on the inside, and Termele goes through.
Indeed, yeah, and it's going to be the last late breakers. Tormata will get that position, so move him now up into the 7th position on the racetrack in the space of 1 lap. Untitled has lost out to both of the Team My3ID drivers, and that all really started back at the Oak Tree corner on the previous lap. It's now up on your screen, the replay, and it's coming down into Oak Tree corner, and you can just see that he got himself a little bit sideways there on the exit of the corner, a little bit of snap oversteer, which cost him the first position. And then at the end of the lap there as well, he didn't hold that defensive line down into turn number 1. You can get yourself a good run out of the final corner, plant that car down to the inside, and already Borgia, you have to say, has pulled away, as has Joni Termele. And Untitled, he was passing his own. No, one of the 3RG drivers, Termele, spins it. That's on the exit of Oak Tree Corner, and yet another driver there losing out massively on Oak Tree Corner, Marius.
Yeah, and that looks like a bit of a bigger issue there. He's not getting the car into gear, apparently. He's only got reverse. He's now got it into gear, trying to recover there. He has to watch out for Jason Lovett. But that's a big mistake from Termele, as he not only drops a several set of positions here, he's also lost about 20 seconds. And in the first 10 seconds, he's not got the car into gear. He was just standing on the curb. For a brief second I thought he beached the car, but he meant to get it going at that point. Very flat part of the track, however. That's a devastating mistake for Joni Termele. He's just gained the position of Untitled, and also Enzo Bonito now passed Untitled, so not really going ideal for any of these two drivers.
Indeed, and Joni Termele, that incident down at the Oak Tree corner has taken out so many drivers already in this race. Again, just on the white line there, on that curve, that car spun. He spun it, he kept it out of the wall, but then his issue was he kind of caught it on the transition of the track. He couldn't get the power down, which is what cost him so much time. And Termele right now is running down in the 11th position, at least on the racetrack. And Joni Termele really struggling now. He's sat behind Jason Lover in the battle for the 10th position. So to run through your top 10 right now, with 17 laps going to be scored complete at the line, it is still Hugo Lloris, your race leader. That gap between himself and Gregor Hutu right now, however, is only about 4 tenths of a second on the racetrack. Kirchhoff in third, Sturgis in the 4th position, all over the rear of a back marker who will just get past. Barazini in 5th, Borgia in the 6th position, Enzo Benito in 7th. Untitled actually just losing out there. In fact, he'll just get past Enzo Benito. A brave move there down at the roller coaster to get past Enzo. So Narumi is now up into the 7th position, and Benito down into 8th, David Cook in 9th, and then Jason Lovett will round out your top 10.
It looks like Narumi has finally put some aggression into his moves now after he's left room on the inside. Now let's see what he does this time. Doing exactly the right thing into turn 1, which is kind of a bottleneck here. You see he turns in, then lifts again, and he just needs to turn more until he can get on the gas. So if you're covering the inside line there, just as Narumi did, that was absolutely perfect. you're leaving your opponent nowhere to go, even if he's fully alongside on the outside. And Enzo Bonito just has to wait another lap here, or another half of a lap, until he gets another shot at overtaking. Meanwhile, Andrea Böttcher has already got 3 seconds of a gap, so you see how much it costs, and Böttcher is also getting closer towards Barazini.
Alexia Loma just going a lap down there to your 2 race leaders, Hugo Luis and Gregor Houtu. Houtu is still all over the rear of Hugo Luis in that battle for the first spot. It doesn't look as though he's done anything so far. The field's starting to spread out. One thing I want to pay attention to, however, is Fulvio Barazini, Marius. He's currently running in the 5th position on the racetrack, 22 seconds behind your race leader, Hugo Luis. And for Barazini, it's not going to get him the race win. However, he's still on a pretty interesting strategy for 3rd position.
He definitely is, and even if drivers like Andrea Böttcher, Giuliano Rumi, Enzo Bonito are currently faster than him, as well as all the drivers ahead, he's going to pit a whole lot later, at least that's what we expect here. So Giuliano Rumi and Andrea Böttcher trying to get the position from Barazini before the pit stop, of course, and then trying to make up more time. But you said a very interesting strategy, and Barazini currently is making everything correct. If a faster driver comes up, he's not really trying to get involved in a big battle, trying to lose more time. He's just going to let him pass, trying to follow, maybe trying to get a good slipstream there, and gaining a bit of time off that move. So that's exactly the right thing to do, basically.
Meanwhile, Joni Tamada on the outside, trying to make the pass right now on Jason Lover in the battle for the 10th and 11th position. Of course, Tamada was a driver who had that issue down at Oak Tree Corner, which put him back at about 5 positions actually on the racetrack, all over the rear of that number 47 car of Jason Lover. The one thing that we always know, however, Marius, is that Jason Lover is one of the fastest drivers in a straight line. It's always been the case through the Pro Series, through the World Championship Series, which is going to make tough life very difficult for Joni Tamada to try and get past. We're on board right now with Joni Tamada.
Yeah, Andrea Böttcher, sorry, that is Andrea Böttcher, of course, similar skins for the My3D drivers here. First time he's on the rear of Fulvio Barazini, and you see Barazini is not exactly defending heavily, he's just trying to make no room for Andrea Böttcher, trying to go in the middle of the track. They're not letting the German My3D driver pass. However, Böttcher will get another shot, this time down into turn 1, and we'll take a look at how Fulvio Barazini does it into turn 1. He has to close the inside line at all costs, and he is doing it, and Böttcher's not really getting that much closer, so by the looks of it, Barazini's also got a good gearing here, set up for straight line speed as they are approaching a Radicals car, that is Pablo Lopez. A devastating race for him as well, 1 lap down in 23rd. And they need to get past him quickly, because and Böttcher, there's not really too much gap until Enzo Bonito, who finally got past Giuliano Rumi and is putting in some fast lap times.
Meanwhile, Joni Tamada trying to do the cut under right now on Jason Lover. He wasn't able to get the job done. He'll be on the outside as they come down into NASCAR bend. Once again, this double apex left-hander that forms turn number 3 on the racetrack, and Tamada going a little bit sideways there. Really is struggling right now to get past Jason Lover in that number 47 car. I was just saying before I turned to you about how fast Lover is in a straight line. It does look as though that is hurting Joni Tamada right now. He's not being able to find a way past that 47 car.
A little mistake by Andrea Böttcher there, just before the oak tree, almost putting the car on the grass. Then that can be a very tricky move. You've seen it on the screen, and yeah, that's going to cost him. That's definitely going to cost him. If you're on a two-stop strategy or on a shorter one-stop strategy, you just need to ensure that you've got a free track, just like the drivers ahead, Atsi Kirchhoff, Jake Sturgis. They've been managing to get past early. They've got a free track now. And look where Kirchhoff is at the moment. Kirchhoff started, and he's got the mistake in turn 1. He dropped all the way to 5th and 6th position, and he's now 10 seconds, 12 seconds in fact, ahead of Fulvio Barazini, and that's a big gap there. Double that until the pit stops, and he's even got a chance at getting the 3rd position home here. However, we're expecting the pit stops to start around lap 25 to 30 here. At that point, Kirchhoff will not be able to claim on his 3rd position. Barazini will regain it, and then it's just a question of who's going to put in the faster 2nd stint, or respectively 3rd stint here, as we expect the drivers on the two-stop strategy, of course, to have the better tires as well as less fuel, so they're going to be faster at the end of the race.
Meanwhile, I have to say, actually, Kirchhoff, that last lap actually was just 1,000th of a second slower than Gregor Houtu. So it does look as though all of a sudden Houtu is struggling just a little bit as Louise is trying to pull out that gap in the battle for the race lead. Of course, in the top 10, the biggest movers you have are Jason Lover up 15 positions, running in the 10th spot. Enzo Bonito up 9 positions. Andre Borcher up 9 positions as well. For the record, Enzo Bonito has been able to get back past Yudan Arumi once again on the racetrack. And one thing I want to talk about our leaders. I know we always talk about the leaders a little bit too much, but Hutu, he fell off. He was almost a second back a couple of laps back. I'm wondering if he's trying to save a little bit of fuel right now, try and get himself one extra lap over Hugo Luis, because he really isn't pushing that car right now, despite the fact there's traffic on the racetrack.
Yeah, that's definitely a point here, as we see Joni Termele against Jason Lovett. These guys know each other from Live for Speed. The both drivers also been driving GT1 cars in that sim. Very fast two drivers here from Inex Racing and My3ID, as Joni Termele makes the move. And after his big mistake there in the Oak Tree, where he lost 4 position, he's back in the top 10 and maybe even looking towards the top 10 finish here. But, well, you said it. It's been like that for the last season as well, and it's been like that for a couple of races this season, that Gregor Hutu just manages to get that 1 lap extra out, whether or not he's taken extra fuel on the start or whether or not he's saving it during his stint. However, that lap will effectively change the race if you manage to get out ahead of his teammate, or ahead of, sorry, not his teammate, but his championship competitor Hugo Lewis. The race will be definitely changing, as we've just seen the guys. They're not getting to any overtakes. It's just between the 3/10 and 1 second gap here, and it's been going on like that for 31 minutes, and that's the whole duration of the race. So if there's a position change here on the pit stops, we'll definitely see a whole different situation ahead.
Meanwhile, Miguel Martin was able to get past Wes Richards in the battle for the 17th position. But moving on, once again, to run through your top 10, it is Hugo Luis, still your race leader. It is Gregor Hutu second, Ati Kelkov in third, Sturgis in fourth, Fulvio Barazzini in the 5th position, Andre Borgia in 6th, Enzo Benito in 7th, Yudan Arumi in 8th, David Corpus in 9th, and then Joni Termele rounds out your top 10. Now, a couple of drivers are coming to mind right now. Of course, we talked about Barazzini and the fact that he looks as though that he was on a much heavier strategy, but also Yudan Arumi, he started this race in the 12th position. He was able to make up ground early on, then lost out to Enzo Benito, who's already fallen 2 seconds back to him. I'm thinking that Narumi, he might not actually be on a 2-stopper per se, but he's looking as though he's pretty heavy on fuel right now.
Yeah, he does. It's a good point, Will, actually. Just trying to take a look at his lap times, and he's also been very slow at the beginning, of course, being involved in multiple battles, but he's definitely not able to follow Bonito here. Bonito got past 2 laps ago, and he's already got a 3-second gap here to Yudan Arumi, so it looks like at least Narumi is a couple of laps heavier, as Enzo Bonito is also closed in towards the Italian from the 6th and 7th position battle, that is, yes, and Enzo Bonito will get the slipstream this time, but not enough to overtake, most likely.
Indeed, and Enzo Bonito very close to come up into the roller coaster on the rear of Fulvio Barazzini in that battle for the 6th and 7th positions on the racetrack. Now, Bonito has been incredibly fast the last couple of laps, and we're actually interested to see if he can get a good run out of Hog Pen Corner. Indeed, he can't, so he will stay behind Barazzini as he complete lap number 23 on the racetrack. Pit road is at a very empty place, and we're not actually that far away, Marius, from everyone being on a one-stop strategy. That fuel window will really open about lap number 29. We're 5 laps away from that. Luis and Hutu might just actually have a ton of raw pace.
Yeah, well, we know they do, but currently in the low 23s there, I'd be surprised if they'd really be on a one-stop strategy. And even if they would, that would just put up the question on what strategy are the other guys there. I mean, Narumi, Barazzini, they are usually not that much slower, and even if they are, it's definitely not by 2 seconds, so a difficult thing to say at the moment, and we're still expecting these drivers to be on a 2-stop, but you said it, the pit stop window for the 2-stop already opening, so lap 24, 25, usually the window for the pit stops to open as Hugo Lewis comes in, as well as Gregor Hutu, and a very late braking by Gregor Hutu there. Hugo Lewis trying to make it safe on the pit entry, and Hutu's right on the rear of Lewis there, and a good stop, maybe a short middle stint here for Gregor Hutu, and he's able to leapfrog Hugo Lewis.
Indeed, so both the drivers onto their pit boxes, both up onto the jacks at exactly the same time, both down off the jacks at exactly the same time. Who's going to win the race off a pit road? Hugo Lewis will just win that race. In fact, he'll put out a couple of attempts for a second gap over Gregor Hutu in the process. They came in together, they come out together. Your first and second place drivers, Hugo Lewis and Gregor Hutu, right now they are scored in the 2nd and 3rd positions on the racetrack, because your new race leader, well, that's Jake Sturgis in the number 3 car.
So you see they're already ahead of Atsi Kirkov there, who's just come into turn 1, and I believe Kirkov has also made a pit stop this lap. Yes, he has, so he is dropped right behind Yudain Rumi in the 8th position there. But very interesting, well, we've seen that the pit stops were so close, but thanks to that for Joni Bäckman here, he's got the exact times, and the drivers were actually almost synchronized in the pits. Hugo Lewis putting in a lap, a pit stop time of 5.2 seconds, Gregor Hutto of 5.6, and all the time Gregor Hutto gained on the entry. He didn't exactly lose on the exit, but he lost it all on the pit stop, so the gap is almost exactly the same as before.
I'll tell you what though, we're keeping an eye right now on Jake Sturgis, because Sturgis did a 1:23.998 that last time past the start-finish time. Now, he was the only other driver really to be into the 1:23s. Of course, Hutto was doing 1:23.4s before, and it does look as though actually that Sturgis is onto pit road, so we'll scrap that argument completely. It looks as though that iNext Racing number 3 car is now onto pit road, Marius.
Yeah, and now the thing begins. Enzo Benito comes in as well from the 6th position, and that would mean that all the drivers we're talking about have all made their pit stop, and that puts Hugo Lewis, of course, back in first position, Gregor Hutto in 2nd, but then Berrezzini moves up into 3rd, and Narumi moves up into 4th. And they are both down into the 1:24s. However, Narumi a good half second faster than the Italian in the 3rd position for a couple of laps right now. So if he's on a one-stop strategy, he's definitely on a shorter first stint. However, I'd still expect Narumi to pit in the next 2 laps, and Berrezzini may be staying out for more than 5 here. However, you really see the gap right now. Berrezzini entering the S's, and Atsi Kirkov not too far behind already. That's about 7 seconds gap there. And if Berrezzini wants this podium, I don't want to say it's over already, but it's going to be a hell of a hard time for him.
Indeed, he has to ensure he can keep Yudain Rumi behind him. The Rumi getting a little bit sideways there, coming out of Oak Tree Corner. Of course, the corner which has given a number of drivers issues in this race already. Narumi not able to do anything as they work themselves down into the roller coaster once again here on this racetrack. There are going to be 26 laps scored complete at the line between these drivers. And let's talk about this 1-2-stop strategy, because we expected everyone really to be on a one-stop strategy with only a couple of drivers on a 2-stopper. Now, for Louise and Hutto, they are clearly now on a 2-stop strategy as Narumi comes onto pit road. For Narumi, he could actually now just put enough fuel to get to the end of the race on one more stop.
Well, it's difficult really. I mean, you're 26 laps in, and you'd need to go another 33 or 32 and a half. That's going to be a hard time. I mean, if you're running a 2-stop setup, which means you're probably going to make a longer first stint, and we've seen drivers here in at lap 24 as Bonito is coming out, Narumi is coming out of the pits, and he's once again behind Enzo Bonito. So you see how much that really costs being stuck behind Fulvio Berrezzini on the 1-stop. But back to the topic, I think pitting late on a first stop, even on a 2-stop strategy, around lap 23, 24 is quite normal, and then you can put in 2 shorter stints, especially the middle stint would be relatively short, and you just see where you come out. I mean, you still need to develop traffic and stuff like that, so I believe Yudain Rumi will just put in 2 short stops here, and he's not really too far from Bonito and Böttcher, so he might even have a shot at position number 7 again.
Of course, Yudain Rumi also overshot his pit stop as well. That cost him about a second on pit road, and that really dropped him back behind the draft of David Korb. So that really did hurt Yudain Rumi, as right now he is scored in the 9th position on the racetrack as we're working ourselves on lap number 27 of 58. So approaching the half race distance in the 8th round of the iRacing.com World Championship Grand Prix Series. For those of you who are just joining us, the story of the day so far, we had a pretty sizable crash before the cars even got down to turn number 1. That took out 3 cars, really upset their day. Stephen Michaels, one of them, right now on the recovery drive of his life in that number 20 car. Then also, it's also been about Hugo Luis and Gregor Hutto. They've each made 1 pit stop. They're going to have to make 1 more pit stop in this race. Luis, right now, pulling away, again, just a tiny bit from Gregor Hutto as they work themselves down the south bend into Oak Tree Corner once again. However, Hugo Luis, he will probably have to come in a lap earlier than Hutto this next stop, if our calculations are correct.
Yeah, and that's going to make it very interesting there. We've been talking about that earlier on how much 1 lap can make of a difference. Of course, you're only thinking about the lap time difference, and you're thinking, okay, it's just 1 lap, so it's not going to be a big of a deal. Yes, it is, because by pitting earlier, you of course get to do the pit exit, and there's going to be no car around you, so you have to do the pit exit and just get a really, really good outlap. If you pit one lap later, you're obviously going to do the same pit exit. By exiting the pits, however, and then being ahead, so the 7/10 Gregor Huttu would be down right now, he might be in front, and he's getting into turn 1, being in front. That's going to change the whole situation, so we're basically talking about positions rather than the sheer pace. Imagine they would be both ghosts, then they would probably get the same pit time and out and in lap, but the position speaks a whole different story.
And of course, the inside line will have the corner for turn number 1 as well. So if Huttu comes up pit road in the lead, and Luis is on the out alongside him, let's go the long way around. He won't be able to cut down onto that pit exit to try and make the pass on Gregor Huttu. That could be incredibly important as this race progresses. The field's starting to spread out just a little bit, Marius. However, you still got Enzo Benito trying to hunt down Andre Borcha in the battle for the 7th and 8th positions. Last time by Borcha, a 124.566. Compare that to a 124.508 for Enzo Benito. Benito's looked very racy here today. I'm worried, however, that he might just be caught out by other people's strategies.
Yeah, and I also wonder where exactly Fulvio Barazini will come out, because Barazini currently the only one in the top 9 drivers without a pit stop, and he's due to do one in the next 3-4 laps maybe, so it's not really that far away from his pit stop window. However, the good thing for him is all the people around him pitted, so he's got a relatively free track. Of course, we're always speaking about in a 2-stop strategy, you need a free track, and you need to get as much speed as you can by not having cars around you. But it's always going to be good. It doesn't depend on your strategy. Even if you're on a 1-stop, you're obviously going to thrive on a free track right ahead of you. And that's what Fulvio Barazini has, as he's putting in the fastest lap time of his stint there, 1 minute 24.2. And you see how much slower it is. I mean, the leaders are already in the 123s, and they've just come out of their pit stop. So Barazini definitely on a 1-stop here. But to get back to the issue, Barazini 12 seconds down Hugo Lewis, and currently 23 ahead of Andre Böttcher, 24 of Enzo Bonito, 26 of Yudaina Rumi, and we're expecting that's exactly where he's going to come out, and maybe a bit behind that, and he's going to be stuck again, so...
Meanwhile, it looks as though just Fulvio Barazini, David Corps and Stephen Michaels are the only 3 drivers in the top 10 yet to make pit stop. Right now, Stephen Michaels all over the rear wing of Yudan Rumi as they work themselves through the climbing S's once again. And in fact, Michaels is going to get a great run down here. Will he try and sell it down the inside? This is going to be a bold maneuver. He will get the job done there over Yudan Rumi. Of course, for Stephen Michaels, this is going to be a rather bad day for him in the fact that, you know, he had that incident when he had his car almost turned upside down only before they got down to turn number 1 on lap number 1. He, in that number 20 Twister Racing car, started this race in 8th position, running in 10th right now. Michaels could have been contending for a podium finish if things went a little bit better for him here today.
Yeah, definitely, and he's hoping to gain at least 2 more positions as Bonito and Böttcher, of course, on the 2-stop strategy. He might leapfrog them as they do another pit stop. However, a bit surprising to me, Yudaina Rumi gave up a little bit easy there, and he's just been out of the pits, and he's already been in late, later than we thought, and we'd expect him to be on a really, really light car and to be faster than he is now. And Will, you said he might even finish on a 1-stop strategy, and the times he's currently doing, he's just a lot slower than Bonito and Böttcher, and he should be a little bit faster, so that's a little bit confusing.
So David Corps has made his first pit stop of the day as they work themselves now on lap number 31, so it is blatantly obvious now that he is on a 1-stop strategy. But still, you have Stephen Michaels carry on, and still you have Fulvio Barazini carry on the racetrack without making a pit stop. They're the only 2 guys. Meanwhile, Christian Laurent is actually closing up a little bit right now on David Corps, and as he's just made his pit stop, is back out onto the racetrack. Needs to get some temperature into those tyres as Laurent is trying to hunt him down in the battle for 11th and 12th positions on the racetrack. But Stephen Michaels, he's on a charge. He's already he's almost half that gap to Enzo Benito in the space of just 1 lap alone. And Fulvio Barazini didn't pit that last time by. We'll keep an eye to see whether Stephen Michaels did. But Michaels, he's pulled away from Yudan Rumi. He's closing up on Enzo Benito. Of course, he's on a much lighter car right now. But that 1-stop strategy in the mid-pack, it does look as though if you can hold it at the start, it really can work. So keeping an eye on Stephen Michaels as he works himself down into hog pen once again here to put his 31st lap in the book. Does he come onto pit road this time by? He stays out, as does Barazini once again.
We are currently writing the 32nd lap of 58 here today, so we're already past the 50% mark here, 45 minutes into the race. Your race leader, Hugo Lewis, started from pole position 1/1000th of a second ahead of Gregor Hutu, and to be honest, I mean, the times right now are not 1/1000th close, but the race until now, the drivers in position 1 and 2, Hugo Lewis and Gregor Hutu, never been further apart than an entire second, and that's been going on for 32 laps and almost 33 laps right now, as they're about to cross the finish line. And we're currently thinking about, they are both on a 2-stop strategy, so the pit stop window will open again in about 7-8 laps. And then it's the question, will Hugo Lewis need to pit 1 lap earlier? Will Gregor Hutu stay out 1 lap longer? And will they just decide this race on the pit road?
Meanwhile, Stephen Michaels with a good run actually, as he worked himself down to the roller coaster once again. He's trying to close up on Enzo Benito. It's going the long way around, but Michaels gains another position there on Enzo Benito, as we've been on board of him for pretty much this lap. He twists the racing car here of Stephen Michaels, and don't forget, the start of his season wasn't that great. He changed teams about a third of the way into this championship and really has done him a world of difference, as he's now on pit road.
So that one might put up the question to Fulvio Barazini. He's not really got that much room left for the one-stop strategy. 33rd lap for him right now. Both Davide Korps and Stephen Michaels were in the pits, or are in the pits right now, and they are the ones on the one-stop strategy in the top 10. So I believe Fulvio Barazini will come in this lap and make his pit stop there. Currently 13 seconds down the lead, 5 seconds ahead of Atsi Kirchhoff, and he will most likely drop down to Udine Rumi range, so something about place number 8 right now. And yeah, it might be interesting to see if he's even pitting out ahead of Enzo Bonito, and that could be a big advantage for him.
Indeed, yes. So it's Fulvio Barazini in that number 10 Triple M Mortadella Motor Mission car. Because he started this race in the 3rd position right now, he's running in that 3rd spot. However, will he come onto the pit road this time by? No, he doesn't. He stays out for yet another lap. His last lap, however, was a 1 minute 24. 1 minute 24.198 for him. His previous lap was 1 minute 24.196. Very consistent lap times for him, but he's still a lot slower than Louise and Hutu ahead of him. Actually, Atsi Kirchhoff was faster that last time by over Fulvio Barazini.
Yeah, now it's really time to think. I mean, Barazini, by not pitting, is now in a massive pile of traffic right ahead of him. Alexi Aloma together with Marcus Caton, Timo Ivonen and Pablo Lopez. That is position 25, 19, 18 and 23. And Ivonen and Caton are in a battle together, so they are not exactly giving him all the room they can. And I just think it might be better to have pitted in that lap. However, the first car, that was Alexi Aloma, has been moving over great. As we see a car ahead of him in the wall, that is Timo Ivonen, who beaches the car in the oak tree, slipping out, hitting the grass and slamming into the wall. Question for the camera direction there. We're gonna get you a replay of that momentarily, but a bent front wing for Timo Ivonen, and that's gonna be another pit stop for the Finn here.
Indeed, yeah, he just actually went a little bit wide there on the first part of Oak Tree Corner, which really hurt him as he's now had a car just swarm past him, Atsi Kirchhoff there to put him a lap down in this race. Keeping an eye out though on Fulvio Barazini in that 10 car. Will he come towards the pit road this time by? No, he doesn't. He stays out once again. I'm really intrigued by his lap times, however. What will he do as he comes past the track once again? This time it's a 1 minute 24.787. He's losing time now, Marius. He's losing time. He lost 6 times per second like last time in the traffic. He's going to lose more time with Marcus Caton ahead of him. Then he will have Pablo Lopez ahead of him. But Barazini, he should come onto pit road about 3 laps ago.
Yeah, now the question is, I mean, he's still doing relatively good lap times. He's probably doing faster lap times than he would if he would have pitted, especially doing the 24.1, 24.2 for a couple of laps right now. So that is definitely speaking pro towards the strategy not to pit so early, and I'm definitely sure he's going to drive until the tank is completely empty and not pit earlier. And that's another advantage of a one-stop strategy. You always leave yourself a couple of laps room to pit earlier if there's really much traffic ahead, but that will always cost you a couple of time right behind or right after the pit stop, as Stephen Michaels, with a problem there, crashed out. And I'm going to take a look what exactly happened there.
off, actually, he had an incident on lap number 33 of the race, did Stephen Michaels, which put him now out of the race. And this is going to be hugely disappointing for him, as he pretty much got that car up into the top 10 after that incident, and it was down once again into Oak Tree Corner. So he was working himself nicely there through the climbing S's, nicely through South Bend, a little bit squirty on the exit of it. Then he comes down into Oak Tree Corner, just like Timo Even. He just goes a little bit wide, catches that curb a little bit. He misses it just a tiny amount there to try and stay on the racetrack into the tyre barrier. He is out of the race. As meanwhile, Barazini is now down onto pit road, making his 1.5 for the day with 35 laps scored complete in this race. Out onto the racetrack, he'll come once again. Right now, he scored in the 5th position. Andre Borcher will just go past him. Let's see whether anyone else. No, he won't, as Marcus Caton's on the pit road as well. So, Fulvio Barazini falls out into P number 6.
Yeah, now you take a look what exactly the gap is to the lead right now. Andre Borcher had 38 seconds the last time by. Barazini just behind him right now, so make that 40 seconds. A pit stop costs you about, well, you do an in-lap of 1 minute 43, so that's going to be 20 plus 5, let's say 25 seconds roughly. So he's going to be 15 seconds down to the leaders. Of course, you have to think about the times he's slower right now, as the leaders are about to pit in 5-6 laps of time. Until then, he will definitely be slower by about 1 to 1.5 seconds per lap. Adding all that together, he's probably 22 seconds down the leaders at the moment, and that's exactly the time Jake Sturgis is right now. So Sturgis is on a 2-stop strategy. He also will pit in 6 laps time, and he will only be about 4 or 5 seconds ahead of Fulvio Barazini if it theoretically comes out to play like this. However, by getting out of the pits right behind Böttcher, I'm safe to say that Barazini secured himself a good 6th position at least, but he will of course get Andre Böttcher and move up into 5th.
But meanwhile, that battle for the race lead between Gregor Hutu and Hugo Luis, that is starting to heat up once again. The gap right now between these two guys, it is 4 tenths of a second on the racetrack as they come down. A huge amount of dust there kicked up by Hugo Luis as they came through Oak Tree Corner. Onto Madison Avenue they go once again. And one of the things I have noticed is that actually Hutu doesn't gain any time at all on Madison Avenue. In fact, he just loses about a couple of car lengths as they work themselves through that section of the racetrack, and it puts him about half a second back as they come down into the roller coaster. But then actually on that final sector, Hutu is so impressive.
Yeah, he definitely is, and that speaks for a good setup there, good balance found by the Team Redline engineers, and both of them of course staying out another time, making it 37 laps completed. And it's interesting to see really here. Gregor Hutu is always a tiny bit slower than Hugo Lewis at the beginning of the stint, so it just takes him about 3-4 laps more to get into the pace, and then they really put in similar lap times for about 50-60% of the stint. And when it comes close to pitting, the fuel is down to fumes really, and you're 2 or 3 laps before your pit stop. Then Gregor Hutu comes out and puts in faster lap times like Hugo Lewis, and he was already down by 1.1 seconds, and he's right at the tail at 0.5 right now. So he's made up all that time so easily, and it's still going to be a very close situation when they both pit. And it's still going to be a question, will Hugo Lewis pit earlier than Gregor Hutu? Because if he will, hands down, I'm thinking about he will lose this position.
Very quickly to run through the top 10. Hugo Luis started first, running first. Gregor Hutu started second, currently running in second. Ati Kirkov up 1 position, running in third. Sturgios Jake up 5 positions, running in fourth. Andre Borcher up 10 positions right now. He is running in the 5th position on the racetrack. Fulvio Barazini down 3 spots from when he started. Enzo Benito up 9 positions. Yunan Rumi up 4 spots. Joni up 9 spots. And then Jason Lover up 15 positions on the racetrack. And right now, these guys, I have to say with Gregor Hutu actually, he's just staying there in the draft, not really doing too much on the racetrack right now. Some guys that are going to be very close to battling if they're not careful. Enzo Benito and Yudan Arumi once again. Yudan Arumi trying to close up to Enzo Benito, and it looks as though that David Corps is also out of the race, Marius.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about a theoretical grid and writing down a little bit, trying to make some calculations where he would come out, and yeah, doesn't sound surprising, but Oak Tree.
Once again, Oak Tree Corner. It is
and it caught Marty Piatella as well, so Piatella even crashing into the car of the corpse there, able to get it going, but also DNF for Piatella.
And
almost DNF. No, he actually got it going again. Sorry, Will, 20th position for Pietile right now. So his pit crew got it fixed, but that looked heavy for both of the drivers.
And I tell you what as well, that corner, it's just been like turn number 1 at Watkins Glen. It is the corner that you have to be so precise. It is so easy to make a mistake. It was the curb at Watkins Glen. Today, it's the white line of Oak Tree Corner that really has put a number of drivers out of the race. To run through some of those drivers, you have Stephen Michaels out of the race, Max Delorco, Mo Garfido, Sam Cattell, PJ Sturgis, Daniel Lopez, Blake Town, and they are all out of the race. David Corpse will be classified as out of the race, as also will a couple of other drivers as well. We only have, however, 10 cars scored on the lead lap, and that's going to be surprising, Marius, considering the length of this racetrack.
Yeah, and I'm looking down the grid, really taking a look at who's on a one-stop strategy, and we've missed a little bit that also Jason Lovett is a relatively fast one-stop strategy possible here. He pitted in lap 25, so that's still a driver just like Yudan Rumi who pitted very late and also caught up a lot of fuel here for his middle stint, while a couple of drivers were already in lap 23. And we're still keeping our eyes on Yudan Rumi here, what he's exactly doing, because he's not exactly putting in perfect lap times here. He's still off. He's not even put in a 23 lap here. Meanwhile, Enzo Benito ahead of him, 23. Even Fulvio Berrezzini is right back down in the 24 mids. And remember, he's on a one-stop strategy.
I tell you what, I've been having a look at Luis's and Hutu's lines the last couple of laps. Luis is so good coming out of Oak Tree Corner. Hutu was as close as he's been all race long as they worked themselves through Sector 1. If he'd actually been able to get a good run, he would actually have been able to size up Hugo Luis and try and go side by side of him in the battle for the race lead as they worked themselves down into the roller coaster. Wasn't able to do that, however. More lap traffic is going to come into play very soon. And also for these two drivers, pit window is open for their second stops. I expect them to come in, I'd say, in the next 5 lap time.
Yeah, I would even narrow that down. I'm thinking about lap 41 or 42. The times are really picking up pace. I mean, they have both been down into 123.2, 123.3 before their first pit stop. And in fact, the last 2 laps Gregor Hutu did, for example, before his first pit stop, 23.2, 23.2. And he's just done 2 1-minute 23.3s, and he's just in lap 41. So that would speak for a very similar strategy here, and just a little bit of a lighter car. And yeah, I'm thinking this or the next lap, really.
Very quickly, we'd like to apologise to all of our fans for the issues that we've had with live timing in the last 20 minutes. We're going to get that resolved with you in the next couple of seconds. But it is still Hugo Luis leading the way. This time, Hutu gets a much better run out of Oak Tree Corner. But still, he gets a big wiggle on exit. He gets that every single lap. Cars are going 2 wide ahead of the leaders right now in what is the battle for the 23rd and 24th positions on the racetrack. Alexi Loma is having a horrible day right now in his car as they work themselves down into the roller coaster once again. The Super Alexi number 16 car. As I say, we only have right now 9 cars scored on the league lap. As Matis Eka, I believe he's made himself his second pit stop of the day. As Yudan Arumi is off the racetrack. Yudan Arumi is off the racetrack, and this was down into NASCAR Ben, turn number 3. He got a little bit high on the entry into the corner, and that put him pretty much out of the race. It's hard lick into the tyre barrier there.
However, the top 2 in the pits, and we've got the cameras on them. The race most likely will be pre-decided here. Who will go first? Very fast stop by Gregor Hutu, and he's got the lead. And now it's the question, will it be an interesting one into down into turn 1? No, it will not be. Hugo Luis takes the second position here, and he has got absolutely no chance of getting it back. And now it's down to the first couple of laps where Gregor Hutu might be a little bit slower. And I'm thinking that's exactly where Hugo Luis needs to make it work. The longer the race lasts, the harder it will be for the Brazilian to get the first position back.
Indeed. However, we've talked about this, how good Hugo Luis is out of Oak Tree Corner. He needs to push these next 4 or 5 corners. Hutu has driven away by about 0.6 of a second over the course of the last 3 or 4 corners. Now Luis is starting to close that down just a little bit. They need to be strong as they come down into Oak Tree Corner once again. Luis very good on the brakes. Hutu just as good as well. Hutu will get the advantage to work himself down Madison Avenue. So right now, your new race leader, Gregor Hutu, in the number 1 car. Hugo Luis in that second position. And it doesn't look as though actually in the draft, Hugo Luis has anything for Gregor Hutu either. down Madison Avenue. He's not been able to close up to the rear of that Team Red Line car. So, in the space of one pit stop, Marius, our top 2 drivers have reversed, and now Hutu looking as though if he's going to get himself another win in the championship series.
Yeah, but until then, it's still a long time. It's just 15, 16 laps here, but yeah, 20 turns per lap. Count that in at a couple of 100 turns until the finish. And on this track, really, it's going to be an absolute battle down to the wire, and none of these drivers can afford any mistakes. And, well, Gregor Hutu is just in the perfect situation right here. He's already in the lead in the championship, and if he's going to win this one, he's going to bring in another 50 points, and that's nothing Hugo Lewis can afford. He just needs to attack. If he doesn't finish this one, so what? He's already way down, and he needs to make it work right here.
Meanwhile, Fulvio Barrazzini's been able to get himself past Jake Sturgis. As Sturgis comes out of pit road, Barrazzini able to fly past him. So move Barrazzini up into the 4th position on the racetrack as well. So a better day than many people expected there for the number 10 MMM car of Fulvio Barrazzini, as he's able to get past the Ironix racing machine of Jake Sturgis. You alluded to it though, Marius. This is now critical for the championship. Hugo Luis, he started on pole position. He's led the first, 2/3 of the race. Then Hutu just breezes past him. And Luis is going to have to be thinking, what do I actually have to do to win a race right now?
Yeah, what does he have to do? I mean, there's not really much to do. I mean, he's just, he's got to put the foot down as hard as he can. He's been doing that all race long together with Gregor Hutu here. They've just been showing an absolutely perfect race until now, and it's just been reversed, really. I mean, it's been Gregor Hutu 5/10 behind Hugo Lewis. Now it's Hugo Lewis 5/10 behind Hutu. We've just crossed the hour mark, and it's not getting easier for either one of them. Gregor Hutu is now in the pressure situation, which isn't that easy, especially on this track. He cannot afford any mistakes here, and Hugo Lewis needs to get this position. There's no way around it. In the championship, he needs to make up points and not lose more points, and an absolutely phenomenal pit stop by Gregor Hutu there, clocked at 4.8 seconds, Hugo Lewis at 6.0, so we hope definitely that the calculations of both drivers have also been correct. We've seen a couple of drivers run out of fuel. Last popular one, Atsi Kirchhoff in the Pro Series, handing out a victory to another driver there by running out of fuel, and that's the least thing we'd want for these two.
Indeed, and Hutu had to get the job done on that pit stop. Let's not forget, on the first pit stop of the day, Hugo Luis was a little bit heavier than Gregor Hutu. So Hutu was a little bit heavier than Hugo Luis even. So that might have come into play in this second stop of the day. We thought that Hutu might have been able to do another lap and then leapfrog Luis that way. In reality, he was able to do it on pit road. He is your new race leader. To run through your top 5, it is Hutu right now with his 6/10 of a second gap over Hugo Luis. In 3rd, Atsi Kirchhoff. 4th, Fulvio Barrazzini. 5th is Jake Sturgis. As they come past the track once again, Marius, still, this battle for the race lead has not been more than 1 second the entire race.
Yeah, and it just shows. I mean, we've been talking about this before the race, and we've actually had fears about this being a relatively dull race, a relatively straightforward one. Driver on pole wins, let's say, but it's exactly the opposite, really. And for 40 laps, Gregor Hutu has been chasing down Hugo Lewis. He's finally made it stick. He's now in the lead, and exactly reversed. I mean, now it's Hugo Lewis chasing down 4:10 last lap by, and the race is far from over, guys.
Indeed, and also it looks like Enzo Benito is on pit road as well, has come down on pit road to get himself 4 fresh tyres, and he will top up with fuel as well for the final time here today. Let's see where he will come out on the racetrack. He's just lost a position there to Andre Bortischer. He will come out in the 7th position on the racetrack. He's way ahead, however, of Joni Tamala in the 8th position. You have to say a good showing, though, for Enzo Benito, the guy who started this race all the way down, Marius, in the 16th position on the racetrack.
Yeah, and not just good showing by him, but also by a couple of other drivers. I mean, it just shows, we've been talking about that in the pre-race show, it will be so hard for the drivers to just get through the race without any mistakes, and it just shows how much it's worth to get a mistake-free race. And even if you take a look at Andre Beccio, who's lost the position to Enzo Bonito last time by, but meanwhile regained it, he's now in 6th position, so a great race by him. Joni Termele had a big mistake early on. He's lost almost 20 seconds, and he's still in 8th position just by making it stick. You cannot afford any mistakes, and even if you do, you need to finish the race.
Meanwhile, Jake Sturgis right on the rear now of that number 10 machine of Fulvio Barrazzini. And let's not forget that at one point, Sturgis was about 2 seconds back from the rear of that number 10 car. They'll work themselves down to turn number 1. Again, lap traffic there coming into play a little bit. Sturgis going to go to the outside line, very close between these two drivers. They don't touch a little bit in turn number 1. They almost touch, and now they almost touch a little bit there into turn number 2. Sturgis, I tell you what, if he can be this close into Madison Avenue, he will get that pass complete. He was sideways, however, down into the first part. A NASCAR Ben almost running over there. Fulvio Barrazzini as they come down into the left hook. Now they'll come through the climbing S's. Barrazzini, I think, has pushed his car a little bit too hard.
9 drivers, in fact, on the lead lap. Matthias Egger, the last one, the Italian driver, pretty much under the radar the entire race, and a couple of other drivers completely under the radar. Yudan Rumi dropped back into 12th position there, having more and more trouble here now, letting Atsi Kirchhoff pass on the straight. And yeah, it's been pretty much like we've been talking it through the entire race. The one stop will be critical here, but we now see that yeah, Fulvio Barrazzini has made it work so far. However, Jake Sturgis is right at his tail, and he's been in about 7-8 laps later than Fulvio Barrazzini. So he's not only got the fresher tires, but also got yeah, a bit of a more nimble car, a bit more agile just for the last part of the race. And we've only got 12 laps to go here, but my bet would be that Jake Sturgis is not going to finish in 5th. He's definitely going to try for 4th.
Meanwhile, Hugo Luis is going to turn our attention to the race lead once again. We know that Hutu is good for the first sector of the racetrack. We know how good Hugo Luis is in sector 2. They come down into South Bend once again. Let's see whether or not Hugo Luis will be able to get himself a good run through Oak Tree Corner. Hutu actually just using quite a lot of curb there. Indeed, Luis will get himself a bit of a run. Nowhere near as close as he needs to be, Marius. That dirty air really does come into effect on that second part of the racetrack before you head up into the Oak Tree Corner. And it looks as though that for Luis, he's not able to run that car in the dirty air the same way arguably Hutu wasn't able to do earlier on in this race. And for Luis, he wants to get that race win right now. He just can't get close enough.
Well, talking about close enough, I mean, you say, yes, he can't get close enough, that's correct, but you're just taking a look at the times here. For the entire part of the lap, he's not even further behind than half a second, but he said it's not close enough. He would be in 3 or 4 tenths when he exits the Oak Tree, plus, of course, rely on a mistake from Gregor Hutu and get a better exit there to get really slipstream. If there's no mistake, there's not going to be any person. That's as easy as it is. And there's not going to be a mistake from Gregor Hutu now, as well as there's not been a mistake from Hugo Lewis in the first 40 laps. So it's going to be a hard thing for him to overtake there. Even if he's a little bit faster, it's really not going to be easy.
So we're currently working ourselves on lap number 48 of 58. There'll be 10 laps left to go in the line in the 8th round of the iRacing.com World Championship Grand Prix Series. Will Vincent, along with Marius, Golombeck to call the last 10 laps of this race here on GlacierTV. Very quickly, like to give a shout out to Team Redline for World Championship tipping. For more information on that, don't forget you can head over to teamredline.co.uk/tipping. Shout out also to our friends over at ETV. And of course, if you'd like more information about iRacing and how you can get yourself half price off your first year's membership, head over to iRacing.com. Meanwhile, I have to say that Hugo Luis, he's very good in the last sector, very good in the first part of sector 1. He's losing all of that time to Gregor Hutu in sector 2 right now.
Yeah, we don't need to point out that what you're seeing is not a replay from the previous races, because we've been seeing this all season long. It's been Hugo Lewis versus Gregor Hutu in all possible ways, really, and it's been like that last season and the season before. And these are the two drivers having all titles in the iRacing Drivers World Championship Series in the bag. Gregor Hutu's got 2, Hugo Lewis has got 1, and yeah, to make it back-to-back, Gregor Hutu needs to win this season, and it's really looking good. He's over 100 points ahead of Hugo Lewis, and we'll imagine they would finish like this. Hugo Lewis would, of course, get a good set of points, but it will just absolutely get him nowhere. He needs to win, and even if he wins today, and they finish every other race of the season like this, and Gregor Hutu can just afford to get second.
Indeed, a little bit of traffic actually as they come out of Oak Tree Corner. Luis is now the one with that snap oversteer as you come off the Oak Tree Corner, which is what just put him, again, half a second behind Hutu as they work themselves down Madison Avenue once again. To have a look a little bit further down the field, you had at the line Matthias Egger and Joni Tamara. They are battling right now for the 8th and 9th positions on the racetrack, but it looks like Tamara has been able to get past Matthias Egger. He's now up into the 8th position, Marius.
Yeah, he is, and Termela looks like he's just repeatedly doing mistakes here. He's had a 1:32 lap in, and that's 8 seconds slower than normally. And yeah, it's not been in the Oak Tree, surprisingly, but it has been in the last turn, which is not as critical as the Oak Tree maybe, but we failed to explain that there's a couple of turns at this track which are yeah, one way and no other, and the last turn is definitely a good example there. You just dive down the inside, the asphalt drops about half a meter, you need to get the compression in exactly that moment. You need to steer to the right and avoid the inside curb. If you don't do anything apart, from that, sorry, you will eventually just run wide and get on the grass, and that's exactly what happened to Termela. And there's so much grass, it will just take him a good piece of time to get back, and 7 seconds. Just like that.
Meanwhile, Jake Sturgis now has a damaged front wing after he ran over the rear of Fulvio Barazzini, whilst these two are battling for the 4th and 5th positions on the racetrack. And this is on the exit of Oak Tree Corner. It looked as though that Barazzini was a little bit slower into the corner itself, as we play up on your screen. However, for Jake Sturgis, he's now got himself a damaged front wing, and that's going to really hurt on a track which has got so many high-speed corners, Marius. You really don't want to, well, you never want to get bitchy your car in the wrong direction. However, for Sturgis, that could cost them a shot now at that 4th place.
Yeah, it does, and they're slowly running out of laps. The leaders just crossed the line, completed lap number 50 here, making it lap 51 right now. And I've been actually thinking about Sturgis being a lot quicker when he got out of pits. He's got just the same amount of fuel, but a lot fresher tires. And he's finished his pit stop and got out of pits right behind Barazzini. But until now, absolutely no chance for Barazzini. Although I expect him to be, for Sturgis. Although I expect him to be a little bit quicker than Barazzini here. But if they continue like that, Fulvio Barazzini will just finish in 4th, and that's going to be a brilliant result for him, and yet another good set of points in the championship.
Right now, Ats Kirchhoff still running in that 3rd position for another good finish there for the number 5 Team Redline car of Atsi Kirchhoff. 4th is Fulvio Barazzini, 5th even is Jake Sturgis, and he has fallen behind now, Fulvio Barazzini, so he's not being able to close up as much ever since he got that damage to his front wing. Andre Borcher is, however, 18 seconds back in the 6th position, and Benito started to fall back as well, with only 7 cars on the lead lap, Marius. Relentless pace here today. So, right now we have ourselves a total of 7 cars scored on the lead lap. Hutu right now is leading the way. The gap to himself and Hugo Luis, that is just 4/10 of a second on the racetrack as they work themselves to complete lap number 51 in this race. So now 8 laps left to go, 7 laps left to go even, in the 8th round of the iRacing.com World Championship Grand Prix Series. Luis with a lot of oversteer there through turn number 1 and 2 as he tries to close to the rear of Gregor Hutu. In fact, we'll go on board with Hugo Luis as they work themselves through the climbing S's. They currently work themselves through NASCAR bend into left hook. And now we're going to go on board with, as I say, Hugo Luis as they work through the climbing S's once again. And one thing you don't actually see is the elevation change in this section of the racetrack as well. And Hugo Luis really trying to put that pressure onto Gregor Hutu. That gap for the last 5 or 6 laps, ever since Gregor Hutu was able to get out of pit road ahead of Hugo Luis, the gap between these 2 drivers has never been more than a second either way in this race. And Luis actually getting a much better run actually this time by out of Oak Tree Corner, but he's not going to be anywhere near close enough as they come down into the roller coaster once again. So he will close up just a little bit. But for Luis, he now knows he needs to be just a tiny bit closer to make full use of that draft as they come down into that section of the racetrack, Marius.
Yeah, and you said it. The gap between these 2 drivers, even within the pit stops, have never been over 1 second. And you can imagine how close that is on a track which has 20 turns over less than 5.5 kilometers. So this is incredible, really. And they are not just 1 second close to each other all the time, but they are also 25 seconds ahead of 3rd Atsi Kirchhoff. And I mean, the drivers in 3rd, 4th, 5th, they're not particularly slow, but they've also put a lap on drivers like Joni, Matthias Egger, Jason Lovett, and even Andre Böttcher and Enzo Bonito, the last drivers who are in the lead lap, are more than 50 seconds down. And it's not really that much taking a look over more than an hour here, but they've still been roughly the only two ones without any mistake here today. Couple of drivers, of course, making little mistakes, but also drivers like Atzi Kirchhoff, Fulvio Barzini or Jake Sturgis almost mistake-free, and I'm almost enticed to say that if you want to finish right up here, you cannot afford any mistakes, especially at a track like VIR. Drivers like Andre Böttcher in 6th, also almost mistake-free, and then Enzo Bonito, the only one in the lead lap with a slight mistake, which has cost him about 5 seconds there. Joni Termele 1 lap down, and we've seen him have a mistake over more than 20 seconds. Where would he be without that mistake? Would he even be in the lead lap? Would he be ahead of his teammate Andre Böttcher or ahead of Enzo Bonito? We'll never know, and mistakes just shows cost you a whole lot of time. However, cross the line another time. Hugo Luis, your 2nd position driver, the My3ID Gaming driver, right behind Gregor Huttu, the leader of the championship, and it is 5 more laps. 5 more laps down to the wire, 5 times 20 turns, less than 100 turns right now for the drivers, and the fuel is just going to be down to fumes for both of them. They've both been having absolutely perfect pit stops. However, Gregor Huttu just got past him on the last pit stop, so his pit stop has even been better than Hugo Lewis one. And well, I'm safe to say this is not going to be much fuel left for either one of the drivers, and none of them can really back out of this. So if Gregor notices, okay, I'm going to be very close on fuel or very, very low on fuel, he can't do anything on it about now.
Meanwhile, I'll come back to that in a moment, because Hugo, he's been as close as he's ever been as they work themselves down Madison Avenue once again. And this is with less than 5 laps left to go in this race. He's still not quite close enough as they come down into roller coaster. But don't forget, these drivers as well, not only do they have to complete the race, they are supposed to bring their car back on towards pit road after the race as well. So they'll have to do a full cooldown lap. iRacing regulations as the car onto pit road, actually. Alexia Loma, but still Hugo Luis is very close now as they come down into turn number 1 once again. He's looking down to the inside. He's not going to do it this time by Huttu. I think he's actually starting to save fuel a little bit. He goes a little bit sideways there as they come out of turn number 2. Marius, iRacing Race Control, they do take a dim view of drivers run out of fuel even after they cross the start-finish line. They're supposed to do that full extra lap. Both of these two drivers right now, they could be an issue. So Gregor Huttu, he could run out of fuel. That will really, really hurt him. He'll lose a ton of positions.
And that's definitely going to be an issue for both of them. And we've seen how close Hugo Lewis got there on the start-finish straight. So that might be the second opportunity to overtake here. But the draft is just too weak for Hugo Lewis to make up time on the long straight. If he would be close enough there, he could rely on a little mistake from Huttu to get it done on the start-finish straight. But not this time. And I'm just taking a look at the oak tree once again. Hugo Lewis now failing the exit. He's getting a little bit sideways out of it, and that's just costing him so much time. He's got a weaker draft, he's not gaining enough, and it goes on and on and on. And if he's just torturing his rear tires now, they will be, of course, shredded into pieces for both of the drivers. But with 3 laps to go right now across the line, he just needs to get a perfect exit there. If he doesn't get an exit there, he's not going to get the overtake.
Indeed, and for Luis, he's now got himself just 3 more chances set up. The fact he's fallen back a little bit will actually help him in sector number 1 this time by. He needs to make sure, however, he gets that run out of Oak Tree Corner. It's still Huttu leading from Luis, leading from Kirchhoff, leading from Barazini, and then Sturgis. They round out your top 5. Borcher in 6th, Benito 7th, Joni Tamada in 8th, Matthias Egger 9th, and then Jason Lover will round out your top 10 here. A number of retirees will talk about that in the GlacierTV post-race show. But for Hugo Luis, he's got lap traffic ahead of him as well. That will help Gregor Huttu because Hugo Luis will breeze past him. Huttu, I was about to say, if that was to wait until Madison Avenue, Huttu would really get a bit of an advantage there. But this is the important part of the lap now as they work themselves through South Bend down into Oak Tree Corner. And Hugo Luis will look down into the inside of that corner, trying to get himself a good run this time. He gets a better run, but still, Marius, he's not close enough. He is about 4 times per second back. That is not what he needs to be, and he's got to close that in the next 2 and a bit laps.
Yeah, and he said it, a good run is definitely not going to be enough. It needs to be a great run, plus a little mistake by the Finn there to really get him the draft, because even without a mistake and a great run, which we've seen 2 laps ago, he's going to get close. He's going to be right at the tail, but he's not going to get any closer. And you will only make an overtake, of course, being at least alongside. And in the turn like the one after the long straight, you can't exactly make a dive bomb or a surprise overtake from far behind. You just cannot overtake if you're not fully alongside. Left to that, the first turn might even be possible to have a surprise overtake. We've seen Hugo Lewis weaving behind Gregor Huttu the one time he has been close, but even if you're that far behind, you're not going to get the pass done. You're just too far away.
Huttu's pushing right now. I have to say, Huttu really is pushing, as he last time did the fastest lap of the race in that number 1 machine. He last time by set a 1 minute 23.246, so he really is pushing. He is throwing all of his caution to win. Perhaps his pit crew said, okay, you're good to go, just go for it. Hugo Lewis in that second position, last time by a 123.454. This time, that gap is almost up to a second for the first time as they come through Oak Tree Corner. And now, Huttu's going to get a bit of a run. That gap is now a second on the racetrack. And Huttu got the draft assist there. And now Louise will get that just a tiny bit. The gap, however, as they come to white flag lap, Marius, looks like Huttu, fuel pertaining, might have this in the bag.
Yeah, and he's not done any mistake, or neither one of them has done any mistake, and I'm safe to say there's not going to be a mistake in the last lap. Maybe if Hugo Lewis would be able to put pressure on Gregor Huttu, but by the time they cross the finish line right now, entering the white flag lap, lap number 58, it is 6/10, no, it is actually 9/10 of a second. Hugo Lewis is down, and he cannot possibly make up an entire second plus get the overtake done, and I'm pretty sure he's going to see it exactly that way, because he's just backing down. He sees the whole endeavor out of the pits absolutely not paid off, and he's not going to get the race win today.
Meanwhile, for Gregor Huttu, that last time by, it was a 1 minute 23.063. Is Louise all over the curbs there in the climbing. Yes, we talked about this in the track guide, that when the tyres start to fall away, you've got to be careful there in the S section of the racetrack. As they come down to South Bend, that gap now is 1 second on the racetrack. That means Louise will not get the draft here. All Gregor Huttu needs to do now is just drive at home the last half of a lap, as Louise again sideways as he comes out of Oak Tree Corner. For Gregor Huttu, he came into this race starting it in the second position. He had to wait until the second round of pit stops to be able to leapfrog Hugo Lewis. He set his fastest lap of the race that last time by. If he has fuel issues, we're not going to know about them. They come through the roller coaster for the final time. They've got a couple of corners left as they come down into the Hog Pen complex for the final time. Gregor Huttu didn't have to win this race, but he will extend his championship gap even more with victory here at Virginia International Raceway. That last time by, he set a 1 minute 23.540, so he doesn't get into the 22s this time by. Louise, he will come home in second. He's finally been able to get himself back onto the podium after a couple of bad races. He needed to get a good finish. He needed to win the race. He didn't. He comes home second, but he minimises that advantage that Huttu will get in the championship. In the battle for the third position, Atsi Kirchhoff will get that one. He'll be about 11 seconds ahead of Fulvio Barazzini as Kirchhoff now comes past the stripe. Barazzini, he comes home in the fourth position there in that number 10 Triple M car. Jake Sturgis, he was close at one point. He falls back to the fifth position overall. Andre Borcher comes home in the sixth position on the race. He's just working himself down to Hog Pen for the final time. And then Enzo Benito will be the last car on the lead lap. Huttu, at the end, you have to say, even if Hugo Lewis was to come out ahead of Huttu, those last couple of laps, Huttu's raw pace was just absolutely amazing.
What an amazing effort by both of the drivers. They finished 6/10 of a second apart, and after 1 hour and 20 in that car, 20 turns per lap times 58. So much concentration needed as Atsi Kirchhoff now comes alongside his teammate from Team Red Line. Absolutely amazing battle, absolutely amazing race, just what a great effort by both drivers.
I tell you what as well, Hugo Lewis is actually pushing right now Gregor Huttu. We talked about how close on fuel Gregor Huttu was. Actually, he might almost be out, and as I said before, the drivers have to get the car all the way back to pit road. So he's got another half lap to do. He is struggling for pace right now. to try and bring the car down to pit road. Now, we don't know what penalties iRacing Race Control would give to a driver who repeatedly doesn't bring that car to pit road. Hutu has had it once before in this season, but Hugo Luis, you have to say, that is some camaraderie there, just pushing his biggest rival up the hill, down into the roller coaster, to try and get himself onto pit road. Hugo Luis, you know, the fact that Hutu is his biggest rival, he could have just let him stop out on the racetrack and take a penalty, but Luis, you have to say that that's true sportsmanship.
Yeah, and it just shows that the entire race not only has been very close time-wise, but also, yeah, pretty much pace-wise overall. And it just shows these two drivers are so close in talent, in pace, in driver's ability, finishing a race within almost half a second here after 58 laps and never been apart more than 1 second. Absolutely amazing.
So to run through then your final race results here from Virginia International Raceway. Gregor Hutu in a time of 1 hour 21 minutes 54.714 seconds, taking victory by just 7/10 of a second over Hugo Luis. Hugo Luis started this race on pole, led for the first 2 stints, and then fell back into that second position. Atsi Kirchhoff in third, 30 seconds behind his Team Redline compatriot of Gregor Hutu. Fulvio Barrazzini in fourth, Jake Sturgis in fifth, Andre Borcher in the sixth position, Enzo Benito in seventh, Yoni Tamara in eighth, Matthias Eggar in the ninth spot. Jason Lovett rounds out your top 10. Then Christian Loren in 11th, Andrew Lacombe in 12th, Miguel Martin 13th, Wes Richards in the 14th position, Yudan Narumi 15th, Timo Even in 16th, Marcus Caton, Paul Ilbrink, Dion Burgess and Pablo Lopez round out your top 20. And Marius, before we go to the Glacier TV post-race show, I want you to give me a driver of the day.
I can't give you one, that's for sure. Gregor and Hugo, just both of them equally. It just shows once again, I mean, Gregor takes home 10 points more, but what are these 10 points worth? It's just so much, and that's just the entire race representing exactly that. 10 points gained by such a close race and such a brilliant battle by both of these drivers. And you have to point out, it's so hard to be that fast in that car, and they've not done a single mistake in 58 laps. Gregor plus Hugo, masterclass. Absolutely brilliant.
Personally, unfortunately, Stephen Michaels for me, he would have got it, and Joni said the same thing. Unfortunately, that crash at Oak Tree kind of put paid to that. Number 10 car for me, Fulvio Barrazzini. Of course, he lost one position in the race. He started in third and finished in fourth. And, you know, people like him and Max DeLorco this season really have come alive. It is great to see the Italian in that number 10 car doing so well here in this race. Post-race interviews coming your way. For those of you who have never seen iRacing before this broadcast, take a short video. This is what iRacing is all about. We'll be right back. So welcome back to the Glacier TV post-race show, and we're standing by with Atsi Kirchhoff. Atsi, you're able to get yourself another podium finish in the iRacing.com World Championship Grand Prix Series. You started this race here today in that number 5 Team Redline car in the 4th position, able to get past Fulvio Barrazzini earlier on, and from there, you're pretty much driving by yourself.
Whoa, what a race. What an annoying track to drive a full race distance. This was the most exhausting race this season so far, but I'm really happy to finish in 3rd position because my pace was horrible. I wasn't even close to Gregor in testing, and this track it shows really well where I'm lacking in terms of technique to Gregor. And in the end of the race, that's 30 seconds, although I'm not sure if that's really the proper gap. But yeah, fourth in the grid was really good. Qualifying was not a bad lap, and that was actually the part I was most afraid of. To start in the back of the grid, I just saw a little bit of the replay of the start, and I saw there was a huge mayhem. So I'm glad I'm finished fourth, and I could have a clean getaway, although I was really late with responding. And to GR cars, they passed me. Double contact in turn 1, little damage, but the lighter the car got, the less my pace got affected by the damage. So yeah, I unfortunately I made that pass on was it Daniel Lopez, and after a couple of laps later, I made a pass on Barosini, who was really quick, surprisingly quick. So during the rest of the race, I just needed to get my laps in, drive consistently, make no major mistakes, and just make maximum use of my two-stop strategy. So after my first stop, Barosini was, I believe, 4 seconds in front of me, or 4.5 seconds. So I needed to make sure that gap was didn't get bigger until he stopped. I knew it wasn't a one-stopper, so I knew after he pitted, I could gain some seconds on him to leapfrog him. And actually I did, so I'm really happy with third position. There was no way I could challenge the first two, so really congratulations to Gregor, who had a magnificent strategy, I believe, passing Hugo in the pit, and Hugo again, great to see him back on top, and not so great for me though, but really happy with third place.
Well, we'll go back to that someone incident. You've already alluded to it a little bit. Just how much damage was there on that race car? And then just how important was it? Did you know that Barosini was on a one-stop strategy? If you did, how important was it for you to find your way past as quickly as you did?
Well, about the damage, I wasn't sure about the damage. It felt like my wheel was a little bit bent, but after a lap, it was not bent anymore. So my suspension was okay. Just the force feedback felt sloppy, and I don't know. Maybe it was just me thinking bad about the car, but the pace was not bad for my normal pace. So yeah, I think the damage was very little. About Barosini, yeah, I knew he was on a one-stopper because after I passed Daniel Lopez, he was half a second or even a second slower per lap. So that was quite clear that he wasn't a one-stop. He was much heavier. If he does a 22.8 in qualification, you don't lose 1 second in one lap in a race on the same amount of fuel. So my task was to pass him as quick as possible, and it was not that hard to get into a slipstream, and luckily he didn't put up a big fight, because that could have made things very difficult. But yeah, it looked quite easy to pass on that lower amount of fuel.
And of course, you get yourself now a couple of weeks once again before we carry on the journey of the World Championship Series. Now, you're going to have to be impressed about the fact that once again you get yourself another podium finish, but the schedule, it takes another twist and turn. We head over to Silverstone in 21 days time, so it's a 3-week break actually now between this race and the next one, and I'm guessing that extra week will be important as we're really into the second half of the season now.
Oh yeah, well, I didn't know there was an extra week in between, but that's really nice. That's some breathing space between the races, but also some time to take a good look at the setup, because we're still lacking something in the setup compared to some teams. Some guys were really quick in testing, and even quicker than I was, even quicker than my personal best, much quicker actually. So yeah, that made me think. I think it's the track that really didn't suit my driving style. So Silverstone, it's gonna be another difficult challenge to get on the podium at first, but I need to challenge Hugo for P2 in the classification. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to get the max out of this season and fight for second position. And with a third place today, where I was aiming for damage control this race, I'm really happy that I didn't lose too many points. And with Spa-Francorchamps coming up, things look really bright.
And final question, you talk about that battle for the second position in the championship. You are only 12 points behind Hugo Louise in that battle right now. Can you, in the second half of the season, close and pass Louise in that battle for the championship?
Well, you never know, and I'm gonna try. He's one of the most talented drivers in the world, so it's not going to be easy. It's going to be very difficult, and I need to bring my A game to get a chance for second position in the overall classification. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna work a bit harder than usual, as long as second place is in sight. And yeah, I've got to keep looking for all those small details that can make difference in the podium.
Well, Atsi, thank you very much for talking to us. We'll see you in 3 weeks' time in Northamptonshire, England, for the 9th round of the championship at Silverstone. And very quickly, we'll run through the championship standings. And Gregor Hooter, with that victory, increased the points gap even further now. He has 375 points in the championship. Compare that to 261 points for Hugo Louise's every going race. Hooter looks as though he's going to get himself his third iRacing.com World Championship Series title. Atsi Kirchhoff, third in the standings, to say just 12 points right now behind Hugo Louise in second. Sturgis in fourth, Martin Conke in fifth, Max Lorco sixth, Fulvio Barazini now in seventh, Enzo Benito in eighth, Martin Pancella in ninth, and Stephen Michaels rounds out your top 10. Of course, for Kirchhoff, he has the advantage in some ways that he hasn't got to lose a race just yet. He has only, not had a bad drop week. Hugo Louise has had a bad drop week. So for Kirchhoff, in that part for second position, there's all to play for as we now close this broadcast and look forward in 3 weeks' time to the second half of the iRacing.com World Championship Grand Prix Series. And that kicks off at the historic Silverstone circuit, the track which in May 1950 hosted the first ever World Championship race for Formula 1. That will kick off our second season, the 29th of June, 3 weeks' time, here on GlacierTV. Until then, from myself, Will Vincent, from Marius Golombeck, we'll see you all in 3 weeks' time. Bye-bye.